You are listening to People, Place, and the Ocean. My name is Jackie, and I will be your host throughout this podcast series that is inspired by the Gros Morne community-led marine atlas. With each episode, we will bring to life the pages of the atlas by learning directly from the people who help tell the story about Gros Morne and its surrounding marine environment. You can download your copy of the Marine Atlas by visiting ecologyaction.ca and visiting the Marine Planning page. Chapter 5 of the Gros Morne Community-Led Marine Atlas highlights key themes that were learned through workshops with fish harvesters. And as you flip through the pages, you will also find maps that were created in collaboration with many fish harvesters to demonstrate areas that are important for recreational or commercial fisheries in the benthic, pelagic, and demersal zones. These workshops were extremely valuable to the making of this atlas. Some of the fish harvesters got very involved in these workshops, with one of them being a fisherman from Rocky Harbour named Ernest Decker. Now I am joined by Ernest Decker, who is visiting me from the Bonne Bay Aquarium and Research Station. So hello, Ernest. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. Oh, hello.
Today, we are here to unpack elements of the Gros Morne Community-Led Marine Atlas, with the historic fisheries of Gros Morne being an integral part of this story. And so, Ernest, can you just tell us a little bit about your background in the fishery and how long you've been involved?
Well, I started fishing 55 years ago at the age of 12 years old. And while I was going to school at the time, I needed some pocket money. So I bought a license for 25 cents at that time, right? Today, they're worth $250,000. So the license. And so anyway, at that time, there was no ground fish license at that time. So you could fish 365 days a year with all types of species, right? So it was later, a few years later, they introduced a groundfish license, which means that cod, halibut, and lungfish, all the species come under groundfish, right? So then I got a groundfish license, right? So then the other species is pelagics. Well, we have that too, right, as well. So it's cape and mackerel and herring, right? Yeah.
So Ernest, you're involved in many different fisheries by the sounds of it?
Well, we have been over the years, but we're kind of cut back a lot there now, because right now we're only involved in crab, commercial, lobster, and halibut, right? So that's commercial fisheries, right? But we also have a lot of species that's closed right now because they say that the stocks is down, right? So we got two closed fisheries, like we got lump fishery closed, we got the cod fishery is closed, the mackerel fishery is closed, the flounder fishery is closed. So I mean, a lot of species are shut down, right? Because they say that the stocks is down, eh? So
Right. Yeah. And so, Ernest, you say you're referring to your family, right? You have a whole family of fishermen that you're a part of, isn't that right?
oh yeah, my brother is involved, my nephew is involved, and well, my father and grandfather. Well, that was the only way to make a living back then, right? Because my father was here in Newfoundland because there wasn't any work back then, so everybody kind of took to the fishery to make a living, well, somewhat a living back then, right?
Of
That's all.
course. Yeah. And you've already started to mention a few things that you've noticed or that are happening in the fisheries right now. So I was going to ask you, what are some of the ways that you've witnessed the fisheries evolve since you started, or maybe some of the changes that you've noticed in fisheries management?
Mhm. Well, I'd like to see our cod reopen again, right? But it was closed 4 years ago by Joyce Murray. She was federal minister at the time, right? She said that she had closed it for 1 year. Now we're 4 years later, and there's no talk from DFO or the FFIW, like no input. But I also noticed that the northern cod, that's the east coast of Newfoundland, they have just doubled their quota on the east coast, or we're here in the Gulf we're not fishing, so it kind of hurts a little bit. We'd like to be able to be fishing cod right now. We love to be able, like, I don't want to be standing around with my hands in my pocket, right? I like to be back to fishing with the little market that we have for cod, but which was good here in Gros Morne, right? We had a good market for local tourists and stuff like that, right? We had a good market for like fresh cod, and then they really, really appreciated that, right? So just a few years back, the AFO said that was fine with them, that we would be fishing cod for tourists and stuff like that, but it all got deleted, when our federal minister shut down the fishery 4 years ago, but now 4 years in and no talk of reopening, so I don't know what's going on with that. If the stocks is not rebuilding, if they are rebuilding, or I think we should have more input as fish harvesters. We know what to do and when to do it, right? With my experience, I do know. And I like to do a pilot project on cod, like to the DFO know what's out there, let them know what's available, what's out there. Because if we choose to do nothing, then nothing is going to happen. We have to do something. Right? So is it rebuilding? Is anybody doing anything to see what the stocks is like? What's really happening with it, right?
Right, that's a really good point. There's a lot more monitoring perhaps has to take place and some more boots on the ground,
Mm,
getting folks like yourself to be involved in figuring
yeah.
out really how the
Yeah.
fish stocks are doing.
Even we had to catch and release, we know what stocks is doing, what kind of shape they're in, and whatever. And I did a pilot project a few years ago with FFAW and what grading cod and stuff like that. Anyway, I did that for a few years, but the fish weren't plentiful, so it wasn't feasible for me to be out of that. I was spending more money than I was making, right? So I had to give it up.
Right.
It's
Well,
not
that's really good that you've been involved in some other research as well for the
feasible.
local fisheries, though.
Right, yeah. I fished out there in Norris Point a few times, actually.
Of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah,
Of
but I
course.
was high grading cod is what I was doing. I was
High
bringing in
grading.
not top notch species, right? High grading means top notch fish, like good quality, I'm saying. Good
Right.
quality. Yeah.
High quality fish.
Yes. And most of it was going to the tourists at the time.
Right,
So
yeah. Gros Morne tourism is
yeah,
huge.
right now I was going to take it to the fish market and but it was going right to the tourist, right? So
Mhm.
my boat and really fresh, right? Oh, which was good. So even now in Gros Morne Park, if they had something like that, it will be working both ways. It will be good for the tourists. It will be good for the fish harvester. It'd be a win-win situation, right? Because it worked for fish harvester, and we could tell how the stocks are doing too. So just use an example, I could compare the stocks today as I did 10 years ago, right? With the same amount of fishing effort. But I'd like to be involved in something like that. I like to know because of the younger people like me, I'm 67 years old now. So I'd like to know for the younger people, right? Like they're in the Gulf right now, we're only fishing 8 to 10 weeks a year, right? So that's not very long. So there's not very much for incentive for a young fish harvester to introduce himself into a fishery. It's not very good for young people. Right? I don't
Precisely,
think.
yeah. And you
So
have your younger nephew.
yeah, but a lot of people like to get into it, but you needs more to offer them. Like for a young fellow, you needs more to offer for him to get into the fishery. Yeah. There is more out there, but I think we should do some studies on it, like a fish harvest or something like that, see what's available. But I don't agree with too much fishing pressure either. I don't agree with that because we'll never rebuild our stocks if we don't do it right. We have to do it right.
Yeah.
I'd like to know where the cod is right now. I really like to know. Right? I've talked to Paddy Daly, Fisheries Broadcast, and that Paddy Daly is a host of VOCM in St. John's, right? So I've kind of talked to the FFAW, but they haven't really come back to me with any answers on where it stands. It seems to me that they don't want to talk about it, the Gulf cod stocks. Right? Anyway, I'm not knocking the recreational fishery or anything like that, but what I'm saying is that Joyce Murray, Federal Minister of Fisheries at the time, she closed the commercial fishery because she thought that commercial fish harvesters, which is 200 at the time, 200 fish harvesters involved with a 3,000 pound weekly quota with logbooks, dockside monitors, and quota. And then she turned around and opened a recreational fishery at the same time for the world. Anybody out here on Earth come here and catch 5 cod a day, right? Right. I'm not knocking the recreational fishery, but it doesn't seem to add up what she did. You know what I'm saying? Like it's good for the tourists, and I understand that. I fully understand what you're saying. So when I talked to the Fisheries podcast last week at CBC Radio, it's always said, Ernest, I'll see if I can get somebody on next week. So anyway, he got Lisa Dempster, Federal Minister of Fisheries, on last week. He said Ernest Decker of Rocky Harbour would like to know why there's still a recreational fishery. So she went back, she said, well, Ernest, it's like this, right? It's about the tourists that are coming here, right? So I said to CBC Radio before that, I said, is it about the money or is it about conservation? So she hit the nail right on the head when she said it's about the tourists, right? And tourist dollars. So it's about the money. It's not about conservation at all. If I had been there when she said that, I would have nailed it right there and then. You're not doing very well for a minister of fisheries, right? You should be talking about conservation, not money, right? Money does not rebuild stocks. Money doesn't rebuild the stocks here in the Gulf. But I have no say over that. But
You were asking the right questions there, Ernest.
I wish I was there in front of her face when she said that. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we should be more concerned about the stocks and about the money. But
Yeah,
anyway,
definitely. Because I mean, that's how we're going to actually get to support the coastal
yeah,
communities around Gros Morne.
yeah, because we need younger blood involved in the fisheries. The bulk of the fish harvesting around Newfoundland now is 60 plus, 90% of them are 60 plus, right? We need young harvesters involved in the fishery, but we also need something to offer. We should have been started 10 years ago to get things going for the right direction for the younger people getting involved. If a young fish harvester is going to marry a nurse or a teacher or whatever, what I'm saying is that she's going to want him working more than 8 weeks a year. That's the way it is. But we also need fish harvesters too. Everybody's got to eat, right? Everybody's got
Yeah,
to make a living. Everybody's got to, got needs fresh fish, lobster, whatever. So we need all kinds of species put in the market. But we also need young people, but they got to know the ins and outs of how to fish too, right? It's not a cakewalk. It's hard work, right? Fishing,
definitely.
it's very hard work within conditions sometimes. I know I've been there. There, I've had it for 55 years. So,
Oh, yeah, you started out real young.
yes, I started 12 years old. I needed some money. I was in school. First thing I bought was spare rubbers.
Nice. So, if you could think about any young harvesters that maybe are interested but aren't sure about getting involved in the fishery, would you have any piece of advice for them?
Yeah, I should be careful, about you getting into because right today, the lobster on the West Coast, Northern Peninsula, is the moneymaker, right? The only thing that's keeping the fish harbors here, like if I say from Port aux Basques to St. Anthony, it's the only fishery that's keeping it alive, right? Lobster has been on the increase I guess it's because of the global warming, the water temperature is rising. So I guess the lobster is probably spawning more or whatever, reproducing a lot more. So the lobster stocks are going up, 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 right? So that means now it's looking like Alberta money kind of thing, right? A lot of money there in a few weeks, right? So I like to have one in license. But since the lobster stocks have risen a lot, the price of license have went up now. So like last fall in particular, I had a fish harvest yacht, like 300,000 license, right? So that's because of just lobster stocks, right? But having said that, I have noticed over the years that stocks can be up one year, down the next year. But it's all environmental, right? That's the way it is. It's been that way since about 500 years ago, right?
Of
That's the
course.
way the fishery is, right?
Yeah.
It's environmental things. It's a
Yeah.
shift in weather conditions, water temperatures, stuff like that. This year, the lobsters was down a little bit because of the weather, right? We had extreme weather conditions, and so we couldn't fish. But other than that, it was pretty good lobsters. That's their main species here in the Gulf. From Port aux Basques was pretty much to St. Anthony. That's what's keeping West Coast Northern Peninsula going in the fishery, right? So
Yeah. Lobsters, really, really lucrative.
yes, it is. Yeah. So
When thinking about the fisheries in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, can you maybe think about any concerns that might be relevant to the Gros Morne region? Like, as an example, bycatch or something like that.
well, we don't have a much to do with bycatches because our fishing gear that we're using right now, like we use snow crab, so we only get snow crab, right? So I use lobster pots, we only get lobsters. So there don't be any other species in that type of gear, right? So we're fishing halibut, so we only get halibut. And like I just finished a halibut yesterday. That's open line fishery, right? So we just only get halibut. And lobster gear is pretty much the same. You just get lobsters. You don't have any bycatch. One of the things that I've heard fishermen talk about here in the Gulf is that we're wondering why DFO is closing a lot of fisheries. We know that the stocks is down, but fishermen say, well, I wonder if all these fisheries are they trying to make it tough for us so we'll exit the fishery because of the oil here in the Gulf, right? There's a lot of oil
Mm,
here in the Gulf. So we wonder if they get rid of us, would they go right in with the oil exploration here in the Gulf? We know there's a lot of oil there. We know that. As fish harvesters, we know it's out there. So I've heard fishermen say, we're in your way. Would you get it? I've heard it said no, but I don't know whether it's true or not. But anyway, just something that fish harvesters have been talking about and thinking about.
yeah, that's definitely something to
And
ponder. Is there any other concerns that you might be able to think of that are relevant?
lots of things in the environment that shouldn't be like plastics, steel pots and stuff like that. It looks a mess. We just had a big storm here in the park, right? So that got to be cleaned up because it doesn't look very good in the eyes of the public. So I guess that needs to be done.
Yeah, we all got to do our
But
part.
yes, we all have to do our part, yeah, in the very best way that we know how, right?
Uh,
I'd like to be doing something for the fishery because we've got a new generations that's coming up in the fishery. So it's just at the next set of lights, let's say, right? We have to try to make it better for them, right? If we want it to keep happening, because you were walking the fishers meeting, the only thing you see is gray hair and fishermen, right? Because everybody's getting older, right? It's time to get out of it, eh? So it's just a matter of time, right? It's very, very difficult for a young person to get into the fishery as well. He's got to come up with this whacks of money and they got to
yeah.
do a lot of schooling. They got to go to a professionalization your harvesting board or to get credits for go fishing. Like you got to get 120 land-based credits for to get into the fishery, which puts you into level 2, right? For purchase and license. So you have to go school for 3 months. I think that's worth 60 or something credits or something like that. So a lot of the things that they bring in there that the young fish harvesters would never need. They don't need this training. I asked the professionalization harvesting board, they wanted young fish harvesters to go fishing with a fish harvester like me, like for 2 or 3 years. So I said, what's into it for them young fish harvesters? Like for regards to credits, right? They said zero. I said, well, why would you want him to go fishing with someone like me then? Well, I said he or she has to learn how to fish, right? So they have to go with a person like you. I said, wouldn't that be a big benefit for a young fish harvester to learn hands-on how to do things, right? So I personally think that's worth a lot of credits. It's training, it's training. If you were to go out with me for 2 years fishing, obviously you'd learn a lot more from me hands-on than sitting in a classroom, right? I'm not saying sitting in a classroom is anything wrong with it, but that's where you learn hands-on, right? So it's worth credits. So it seems to me like it all goes back in right again the money. Right? Let's go back to the money. So for the
Mm,
young fish harvester, for the enter to do these credits in school costs $5,000. $5,000 is not a lot of money, but if you're 18, it is. It is a lot of money. It's hard for them to come up with it. So it's not a cakewalk getting into fishery now. It takes about 5 years or so. I could become a doctor before I become a fish harvester.
oh, yeah.
So it's not that difficult to learn how to go fishing, but I think they have to go through a lot in order to step into a boat, right? The young fisher. I really do.
Yeah, there's a
So
few barriers.
I think there's a few barriers there that should not be there, right? So I asked our president of our union last fall before she was elected, which Don Street here in Newfoundland. She said she would address it as soon as she got elected, but I've called her a few times since, but she hasn't answered the phone yet. But so she's not returning the calls here. But it's like Patty Daly said, our host of BOCM, he said, now she's elected, she don't have to talk to you. So I don't know. I don't know about that, no, but I guess so. I wasn't out to talk about anything rude or drastic, but I just want to say things like it is, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you're a really good voice, Ernest, and you've been really
And
speaking up for your community.
Alexis thing's not better for the younger people. I'm soon be ready to wash my hands with the fishery because I'm not getting up in age, right? And I find it very, very hard work, but I don't give in very easy. So it's hard work.
Good for
But
you,
anyway,
Ernest. So you've been really involved actually throughout the whole making of the atlas, which is, of course, what we're here talking about. So, out of curiosity, what is it that motivated you to get involved in coming to the workshops leading up to making this atlas?
Well, like as a fish arbiter, I like to know what's happening in my surrounding areas because there's no good anybody in the area have a meeting and me asking my neighbor next day, well, I wonder what was that yesterday. You got to go there. You got to listen to what they got to say. So everybody's got an opinion, whether you like it or you dislike it, right? Everybody thinks different.
Of
But,
course.
so I think everybody's entitled to opinion, whether he's good or bad. That's just the way it is. So at any meetings or Rebecca has meetings, I usually shows up, man. So I want to know what's going on and where we're headed, what we're up against and stuff like that, right? So I like sharing my knowledge and I like to give my opinions on stuff too.
Yeah, and it's extremely valuable to hear directly from the fish harvesters, especially this Gros Morne community-led marine atlas is about people, place, and the ocean. So of course,
Mm.
it's about people like you, and it's about this place that you guys call home, and then the ocean that you guys are making a living off of.
I think one of the good things about Gros Morne now, I think it would be a good idea if we had a fish harvester here, like even we had a catch and release, like just like I said, just use an example. If I, as a commercial fish harvester with 55 years experience in fishery, if we had a fishery, ongoing fishery here, like during the months of July, August, and September, with catch and release, we're taking tour people out, right? I think it would be good to show them what's really happening in the fishery, hands on, take them out, catch lobsters, but release them. So you're not doing any damage to the fishery whatsoever. So catch a cod or release it, right? Or halibut, right? Release it, right? I think they'd like that. I think that would be good. Or another good way would be to have a fish harvester fishing a species for food, like some fish harvesters supply gross more, but fresh quality cod or flounder, whatever is needed in the fish market. That would be another good idea, I think. But right now we're getting it frozen. I don't think that's the way, right?
Mm-mm.
Even we have some pilot projects on the go, like what's it like now compared to 4 or 5 years ago, right? There's nobody answering the questions, right? So I like that answer, huh?
Yeah.
But I need to go in from DFO to do that, right? So I can't do it illegal. All right. Yeah.
Yeah. But you're posing the right questions. Do you
Yeah.
have any other ideas on other ways that we could maybe help fisheries management or maybe improve the decision making around the fisheries
Yeah.
that could be more helpful and supportive for coastal community here?
Yeah, we got to watch what we're doing. Like some species, we can't overdo it either because if we do, we'll get it in trouble again, right? So, like fish harvesters is pretty responsible in what they do. Like they're on the water every day and they see what's going on. And if it's in trouble, they'd be the first ones to let you know, right? They know because they're comparing every year, year after year. So I know, like our license right now is like for a cod. We used to fish cod on the Labrador coast back in the 80s, but our license still states and for 2J, that's Labrador Coast, but we're not allowed there right now. We'd like to be able to do it, but we always got these roadblocks, right? So I'd like to sit in on some DFO meetings. I really would like to sit down, but it seems to me when they have meetings at that, it's just a handful of people there. The only people that's there is who they want there, right? The only thing they want to hear is what they want to hear, right? Yeah, so they don't want to listen to like a hands-on person. They really don't want like fish harvesters like me that what the input should be, like what you should do to make it right. No, yeah, so but I don't like to see wrongs and all the time, but because we're dragging our heels on rebuilding stocks too. We're dragging our heels. We're not doing it right. I like to see it done right. So we're not for me as much, but the young harvesters that's coming up. And they're just around the corner. I got nephew Conrad there. And there's a lot of young ones they'd like to get into because they see
Yeah.
the lobster fisher as Alberta money. That's what they see it as that. But it has been lobster fisher has been good in the last 2 years, right? So I'd
Hmm.
say anyway. So I assume you're ready to pack it all in, tell you the truth.
You ready to pass the torch on?
Yeah, I'd really like to see it better for younger people, I must say.
Hmm.
So, well, we can't, we got to watch what we're doing, but
Yeah.
there's ways in doing things, but we need not to overdo it, but new ideas. If we're going to do it, we have to do it right. So
Yeah.
that's what I say.
I really love that you're thinking a lot about the next generation.
We have to.
And
We got to think that way about nurses, doctors, lawyers. But we have always talking about the new injuries. It's fishing is a profession like every other job, and it
Yeah,
is what it is. But over the years, fishing was always looked down on. As a fisher, you were looked down on, but not so much these days. But they were back when I was started. Right, that's 50 years ago, 55 years ago. Right, didn't look very good. Right.
but I mean, the fisheries, it's just so tied in with the culture around
Mm,
here.
that's right on. Yeah, the fishery of Newfoundland is the backbone of the island. Right, that's how it was brought. It said 1497. Right, so it's going
Absolutely.
back. It's still the backbone of the island. Right? So there's a lot of fisheries around this island. I've been on
Definitely.
a lot of wharves in Newfoundland. I've had a lot of chats with different fish harvesters, the way they think. I think they have some good ideas on this cod, right? There's good ideas out there. I think I could have a lot of good answers for that. I think I can, right?
I feel like you do too.
Yeah.
What else do you hope for when you think about the future of the fisheries in Gros Morne and the surrounding area? What do you hope for?
Yeah, maybe some rebuild stocks, younger people getting into it, and maybe some little projects where, say, just you can use an example like Rebecca. She's got a restaurant on the south side of Bombay. She probably would like fish lobsters or something like that, right? Small markets and stuff. Something that we could get for Gros Morne area like that. Like fresh. I mean, we don't have to overdo it, but we can work along with the environment and rebuild stocks, right?
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people would agree with you. They'd love to see some fresh seafood,
Yes,
some
right
fresh
on.
cod for their
We
community.
could have, fresh markets here in Gros Morne National Park. They'd love to come and buy right off the fish harvester too, as well. Right
Oh,
out the
yeah.
boat, right in the oven or frying pan, whatever you want to put it.
Yeah, wouldn't
Whatever
get
you want
fresher
to
than
do.
that.
Yeah, right. Choose whatever you choose to do.
Those are really good
I, cer-
ideas.
I certainly don't have anything against the recreational fisher, but when the federal minister of fisheries said last week, Joanne Thompson, she said that she would open the recreational fishery for boat tour operators 7 days a week. She implemented for this year. It was a pilot project for this year, right?
Mhm.
But she just opened another can of worms when she said that, because she still has the 200 plus arbiters shut down, right? She shut down 200 plus arbiters. And then she said to Todd O'Brien, Fisher's broadcast, which, well, I had to do that, she said, because that's what brings the money. That's what brings the money here, right? It's a tourist, right? So I said, well, yeah, I don't understand that, but you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. You're a federal minister right now. You're a new blood. You should be talking about conservation, not money, right? And money's not going to build this stock. Well, we're only on 3,000 pound quotas when we left the fishery 4 years ago. We had 3,000 pounds a week. That's what we had, right? So we were up to around 5 or 6 weeks a year. But then when we went down to 2 weeks a year, they closed it. We had 200 arbiters involved on the West Coast Northern Peninsula, but there's 500 there, but it's only 200 involved at 3,000 pounds a week for 2 weeks. So we do the math on that. We never took very much cod into the Gulf as a commercial fish harvesters. But having said that, we don't know what recreational fisheries take note, because they have no logbooks, they have no dockside monitoring, they have no quotas. No, I don't have anything against the recreational fishery, but it's just that the way that we've been treated, like as fish harvesters, right? But if I were still fishing this cod like 3,000 pounds a week, I could support the local community. I could support the fish market for Gros Morne. Look, I could support that, but I know when it closed at 2000 in 2022, I actually fish here in Bombay itself, and then I used to be 1,000 pound a day, like no problems, right? With catching that much fish. Nets at that time were just inshore, right? But I think they're doing some kind of fishery now, a test fishery. I'm not sure, but anyway, I'd like to be talking to Don Street, our head of the FAW, and Joanne Thompson. Believe me, I have lots of questions. So I'd like to see something happening around here. It can be changed, it can be made better. So fish daily cod would be good for the local markets, I'm sure. So
Sounds pretty good to
very good.
me. Yep.
Very good.
Ernest,
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming to the station today and sharing all of your knowledge with everyone that's going to be listening to this. I really appreciate it.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Nice talking to you.
In the next episode, we will continue our discussion with Ernest and talk more about what stewardship looks like in the fishing industry and ways that we might look after our fishery for the next generation. Be sure not to miss the next episode and subscribe to the podcast now and follow along as we tell the story of Gros Morne, the people, place, and the ocean.